Hey guys, hope your first week of class went well. I know it's kind of new jumping back into a semester, especially with an online class. So if you're still feeling lost about where to find anything or you don't feel like in the right rhythm, feel free to reach out. Best way is probably going to be call me during office hours and I can try to walk you through things or try to help you out. But hopefully we're all kind of getting our feet. All right, so last week we had a lot of lectures to watch. You should have watched chapter 1, which was like our introduction. Chapter 15 was on evolution. 19 was on systematics and phylogeny, like how we group organisms. So you've only got one this week, but here's the kicker is that you need to watch it quick because we've got our first test at the end of the week. So chapter 2 is on chemistry. I know that sounds weird. We're doing a chemistry chapter in a biology class, but when we start talking about our cells, when you think about like all of the processes that take place in your body, there's a lot of chemical reactions that are involved in that. So we need to know the very basics. If chemistry intimidates you like it probably would me if I was a student, this should hopefully make you feel better. For 1 year, and this was like the most miserable year of my life, I taught middle school, 7th and 8th grade, and I taught chemistry. This is 7th and 8th grade level chemistry. This is not, we're not going to be balancing equations or anything like that. This is just kind of the basics. But this is also one of the chapters that some students kind of struggle with. So what I want you to do is watch this as soon as you can. And that way, if you do have any issues, we can work through those before the test comes around. All right. So watch that chapter 2 chemistry lecture video. Reach out if you got any questions about the material. All right, next up, we've got a exam 1 review quiz. What we're going to do is every time before we take an exam, I'm going to post a review quiz, and it's going to be due when the exam closes. Now, ideally, you're taking this early, like you're studying early in the week. You're like, okay, I feel pretty good, and you take that exam 1 review quiz. What I want you to do, now check your answers before you turn it in. I want you to get 5 out of 5 points every single time you do these, but what you can do is use this as like a quick self-check to see how well you know the material. So if you pull up the questions and you're reading and you're like, man, I don't know any of these, that's a pretty good sign that you need to study a little bit more before the test. All right. Now, if you don't know them, then look up the answers and make sure you answer everything right and get your 5 points. You can use notes during these. That's perfectly okay. The review quizzes, you can use notes. The test, you absolutely cannot. All right. So make sure you get all the answers right before you submit it, but use that just kind of like as a gauge of how well you know the material. If you felt really comfortable with those 10 questions, then maybe you're in good shape. But if you're struggling with the review quiz, you got some work to do before the real test. All right. Okay. So finally, this is the big, not finally, but most importantly, the big item this week is we do have our first exam. It is on chapters 1, 15, 19, and 2. So the 3 chapters we watched last week and the chemistry chapter that you're going to watch at the beginning of this week. It's going to be open Thursday and Friday, so 48 hours. I know some people have like weird work schedules. You work during the day, that's why you're having to take online classes. But it's open for 48 hours continuously. So find a time in your schedule that works for you. Best advice I can give you on exams, because this is the only assignment that has like a strict date of you've got to do it within this window. What I want you to do is look at your schedule, look at your work schedule, appointments, personal things you have to do, and schedule a time. Say like, I'm going to take this test at 9 p.m. on Thursday. If you'll schedule a time, you're less likely to say I can do it later, and then before you know it, you're not ready for it and you're cramming, doing it at the last minute, or you actually forget it. If you'll schedule a time to take your exam, I think that's a really good thing to do. All right. So you had the practice exam last week. Remember, it was just like simple questions, but you had to do things like record your environment, make sure the webcam was centered on you. I'm actually recording this the week before you're watching it, so I haven't had a chance to review all of those lecture videos yet. But if you did the practice exam, go back and see if I sent you a message. I'm going to be giving feedback. Like if you didn't record it the right way, or if your camera is like pointed up like that and you're taking the test, you're not going to get credit if you take a test like that. And that's like really awkward to read the computer screen. So there's no reason you should do that. But just check your Blackboard messages, see if I gave you some feedback, and make any changes that you need to. If you did not do the review quiz last week, you can't get the bonus points anymore because it's past the due date. But it is still open. I reopened it early this week, so you can go back and take it again if you need to work through anything. All right. So just make sure you do that between Thursday and Friday. It'll be open 48 hours. Okay. Last two things real quick. We're going to have discussion boards every week that we have an exam. And in this class, since it's a mini, that's almost every week. But if you've got an exam, there'll be a discussion board. What it is, I'm going to post a video, or sometimes it'll be like a radio news story that I heard, but it's going to be related to what we're talking about in class. This one is on biodiversity. That's something we talked about in chapter 1. So if you'll go to the discussion board tab to the left, discussion board number 1 is open. Excuse me. I've got a quick video for you to watch. It's a TED Talk from a scientist named E.O. Wilson, who's it's weird to have favorite biologists, but he's one of my favorite biologists. And he's given a talk about biodiversity, all the different types of living things that you can find on Earth. So watch that video. And then in the discussion board, you got to do two things. You are going to leave a post yourself about like, this is what I found interesting, or, hey, this has something to do with what we talked about in class. But you're going to be relating it to something that we've talked about in class. Or you can just give me like a summary of this was my favorite part. It does need to be substantial. I'm not looking for like a whole essay, but you can't just say like cool video and get credit for that. You have to tell me something about the video that you liked and make sure, it's like you watched it and you're discussing it. Okay. So that's number 1. You're going to leave a post. Number 2, I want you to respond to at least one other student's post. So this is our chance to try to get a class discussion. I know that's kind of hard in an online class, but if you will, respond to another student. Sometimes you come up with like new ideas that I haven't thought about before, things like that. Do those two things. It's worth 10 points. That should be an easy 10 points just by watching the video and leaving a post and responding to another student. All right. Now, lastly, we've got our first lab assignment. It's on biological macromolecules. I know that sounds awful. We talked about chemistry this week. The chapter 2 that you're going to watch. But next week, we're having to jump ahead a little bit. Next week is on organic chemistry. And again, that sounds intimidating, but we're not doing like what you would do in a chemistry 121 or whatever the organic chemistries are. We're just going to be talking about the types of molecules that make up living things. We'll talk about proteins, fats and oils. They're called lipids, carbohydrates, which are sugars. But we're going to go ahead and do a lab on these. In your lab kit, you've got a bunch of like chemicals and vials and reagents that allow you to test different substances to see if they contain protein or see if they contain reducing sugars or see if they contain starch. So that's what we're going to do in this lab is you're going to have several different substances that you're going to test to see if they're positive or negative for all these substances. So a couple things. Number 1, since this is our first lab, I want you to give yourself plenty of time to do this. The book or the guide that comes with your lab kit says that this can take 3.5 hours, I think. Most students I've talked to have found that it does not take that long, but I would give yourself at least 4 or 5 hours or so just so you're not running out of time, just because this is your first one. All right. The other thing, here's another one, is that you're going to have to provide some materials for this lab. The Science Interactive obviously couldn't send eggs or milk because those would ruin by the time they got to you. So look, there's a list at the very bottom of this announcement that's got everything that you're going to need to provide. So bottled water or distilled water. What I would do, you can get a gallon of distilled water because we're going to use this several times this semester for like 99 cents at the grocery store, and you can just use that same gallon every time we need it. Eggs, I'm sorry ahead of time. I know eggs are stupid expensive right now, but you'll need an egg for part of this lab. Boiling water, you can just use tap water, but you're going to need to have like access to a stove or a hot plate or something to get that water boiling to complete part of this lab. Paper towels for cleanup. There's going to be part that'll ask for you to use paper towels, dish soap. The only other things you might have to go to the grocery store to get is milk, and it says 2%. 2% milk works best. If you use another type, it might not get the right results. A russet potato. You're going to have to chop up a potato and use it for an iodine test. You will need potatoes later for another lab in a few weeks. And if they don't go bad, you can just buy like a big potato or buy a few, and you can reuse that. That's about it. Vegetable oil is the only other thing. The rest of it's like a spoon or a fork, or it says plastic spoon. So if you don't have that, get one of those. or go out to eat. You'll probably get one there. Sharpie, things like the dish soap, things you probably have at home already. So just look over those. Let me know if you have any questions. Man, I told you last week that these announcements wouldn't be that long, and this one was just as long. But keep watching them. I promise they'll get shorter. It's just we've got some new assignments that I had to over-explain a little bit. All right. If you have any questions, if you need help, let me know. Thanks.